Not in the 2022 budget, but maybe in 23 we get an I-beam.
Yep.
It's so expensive.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. Harry, you probably can agree with you. You're not, it doesn't block anybody except for the water. All right. Karen will. We're ready. All right, let's bring the Thursday, October 21st, Webster Town Board meeting to order. Pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Save at the bell on roll call there, Dolly. Do roll call now.
Supervisor Flaherty.
Here.
Councilman Dean.
Here.
Councilman Cahill.
Here.
Councilwoman Capelli. Present. Town Attorney Genesi.
Present.
All right. Well, our first item up tonight is we're almost to the finish line of a process that starts actually in May. On a calendar year budget, we start the budget process in May of 2021 and have several different aspects to it. Tonight we have a public hearing to go over the preliminary budget that was adopted on September 2nd. And depending on how that goes, the next town board meeting on November 4th is when the board would vote on adopting the 2022 budget for the town. So with that being said, I'm going to open up the public hearing on the 2022 budget. Now, what I'd like to do is have, I'm going to present some highlights of this 2022 budget. And then when I'm done with that, since it is a public hearing, we will have people from the floor, if they'd like, take the podium for any questions they may have or comments on this. So, the town of Webster kicked off the 2022 budget process in early May. Each department head was instructed to put forth their best effort to minimize the tax increase to the citizens while providing for the needs within their respective departments. The department heads presented their budgets during the televised budget workshops that were held on July 29th and August 5th. In order to balance the budget and maintain the same level of service, the town has to determine how to handle rising annual costs due to inflation and other metrics. One of those metrics that I had in one of my Supervisor Corner articles is that the cost of personnel at the town, government, both in salaries and hourly rates, benefits, retirement, is about 70% of the annual budget. And when you have that, which is basically just a reality of the world that we live in, and you have union contracts that have payment increases, or salary rates or hourly rates, and you also have, as anybody that is in the room who's an employer or is an employee at their various jobs, health insurance benefits have risen dramatically over the years. So when the town is looking at the state 2% tax cap as a metric that they need to be cognizant of when they're setting the budget, without getting into too much voodoo economics and math, when 70% of your budget is personnel, and that personnel is almost slotted because of union contracts and benefits and all of that as significantly more than a 2% increase each year, it does put a lot of pressure on the department heads as far as putting together a budget that in aggregate between their personnel and the other things that they need to perform the services for the town citizens to keep it under that 2% cap. Since the town contains the village of Webster, there are two different tax rates that apply to the residents. A village resident pays the tax rate derived from the tax levy within the general, townwide, and highway townwide funds. These funds pay for the services which benefit all town and village residents. A resident who lives outside the village pays the tax rate derived from all four operating funds. The sewer fund provides wastewater collection and treatment services to the residents who live outside of the village. There is an operation and maintenance rate which is paid by the 14,875 residents who own a home that is connected to the town's sewer system. This O&M rate covers the cost to fund the collection system and the wastewater treatment plant. There is also a capital charge which is paid by 15,501 residents who are connected to this system who have a collection line running in front of their home. The capital charge rate pays for equipment, treatment plant upgrades, and debt service from past capital projects. The estimated sewer rates for 2022 compared to 2021 in aggregate are as follows. The 2021 rate was $192.12, and the 2022 rate is $191.45. It is actually going down 67 cents. The revenue. The town benefits from a number of significant revenue sources other than property taxes. The key revenue categories are as follows. Cablevision fees, $550,000. Recreation programs, fitness memberships, and classes, $821,100. Lodge rentals, $100,000. Mortgage tax, $980,000. Sales tax, $4,300,000. Building permits, $120,000, and consolidated highway improvement program $250,000. Continuing on with the revenues, Monroe County snow and ice contract, $395,000. Monroe County highway improvement contracts, $175,000. Parkland Trust Fund park and recreation fees, $150,000, and commercial sewer charges and entry fees, $711,878. I would say, in summary on that, there are parallels to a government budget that do parallel running a business. The budget in Webster, if it is $35 million in total, the more revenues we get from the sources and other, that I just mentioned and other sources, if all factors being equal, the less revenue we have to create to pay the expenses of the budget from taxing our citizens. That's the best way I can explain it. The expenditures, the greatest portion of the town's budget provides funding for many services that are provided by the employees. Types of services run the gamut. They include the court system, law enforcement, fire safety inspections, animal control, park maintenance programs for the senior citizens, the fitness facility recreation programs, public works, drainage improvements, leaf pickup, snow plowing, maintenance of roads and bridges, Webster Public Library, the wastewater treatment plant, the wastewater pump stations, and the entire sewer collection system. The budget also includes special districts, which cover the cost of capital improvements and maintenance for drainage, lighting, parks, sewer systems, and water supply lines. The total expenditure budget for 2022 is $35,863,560, which includes $3,078,276 of interfund transfers. These interfund transfers effectively gross up the expenditures and revenue. The net estimated expenditures for 2022 is equal to $32,785,284 and are broken down as follows. Employee compensation, $14,047,991, that's 42.8%. Contractual costs, $6,768,062, that's 20.6%. Employee benefits, $6,539,900, that's 20%. Debt service, $1,864,981, that's 5.7%. Capital purchases, $1,856,850, that's 5.7%. And retired employee benefits, $1,707,500, that's 5.2%. Town's employees fall into 5 groups, which include the non-union administrators and part-time workers, the blue-collar union, which covers highway and sewer, the police union for the police officers, and the white-collar union for office administration. There are 3 union contracts which cover approximately 120 full-time employees. The blue-collar and white-collar contracts provide their members with a 2% cost of living increase for 2022. The police contract provides a 2.5% cost of living increase for 2022. The employee benefits are driven by the terms of each agreement. Due to the growth in population, infrastructure needs, and a demand for services, the town has had to add a number of employees. The 2022 budget includes several new positions, which include the town engineer, assistant building inspector, and a help desk position within the information technology department. In addition, the code enforcement position was moved from part-time to full-time. The highway department, and the sewer department will be adding 1 full-time position. The Parks Department will also add a maintenance mechanic position to handle all custodial services for town buildings. Debt service represents 5.7% of the budget and consists of serial bond principal and interest payments for prior debt incurred to complete various building and infrastructure projects. In 2021, it also included bond anticipation note payments for current and recent projects that had not yet been rolled into long-term serial bonds. All of the bond anticipation notes were rolled into a serial bond in July 2021. And may I add, all at a very nice interest rate.
A very good interest rate.
Yes.
The timing was right.
Yes, it was.
Yes, it
The remaining budget is made up of capital purchases, 5.5%, and contractual costs, 20.8%. Some of the key items within these categories are as follows. The Information Technology Department will invest $109,500 in the equipment necessary to maintain the efficiency and integrity of the town's computer network. The Assessing Department will continue its quest toward a full revaluation by incurring $70,000 to contract with a consultant who will serve as the revaluation project manager. This is a 3-year plan which will affect the 2022 through 2024 assessment roles. The Police Department is slated to replace 3 marked Ford Explorers at a cost of $100,000. The Parks and Recreation Department will replace a tractor and a 12-foot batwing mower attachment for a total cost of $67,000. The Highway Department is scheduled to replace a number of vehicles within its aging fleet. The planned replacements include a Ford F-350 pickup truck for $55,000, 10-wheel truck for $265,000, low-boy road tractor for $150,000, excavator for $205,000, and a street sweeper for $250,000. The town has a contract for sludge hauling and disposal that costs $125 per ton. The current contract goes through June 2022, and it is expected to cost $450,000 in 2022. The sewer pump station capital improvements have been budgeted at $40,000. This includes $14,000 for a new control panel at Mill Creek, $11,000 for a new control panel at Pioneer, and $10,000 to pave and make drainage improvements at the Hedges pump station. Capital improvements to the sewer collection system have been budgeted at $95,000. This includes $35,000 to replace lateral lines, $30,000 to replace deteriorated discharge manholes, and $30,000 for line issues noted while televising sewer lines. The sewer fund budget also includes a $200,000 transfer to the capital reserve, which will be utilized for future capital projects. Serial bond principal and interest payments, which make up a portion of sewer capital charge, increased from $303,559 in 2021 to $537,114 in 2022. The town rolled bond anticipation notes utilized for the wastewater treatment plant Phase 1 project into serial bonds in July of 2021. Bond anticipation principal and interest payments in 2021 budget were $240,957 compared to zero in the 2022 budget. The library leases space in the Webster Plaza. The cost of $438,935 has increased from 2021. It consists of rent of $263,563 and common area maintenance charges of $98,372 and real estate taxes of $77,000. The library serial bond debt for renovations matured in 2021, so the budgeted cost has dropped from $117,300 in 2021 to zero in 2022. The town is fortunate to have accumulated surplus from prior years, which is available to stabilize the tax rate. The 2022 budget includes appropriations from fund balance that total $2,085,815. This includes $1,488,000 from the operating funds, $450,000 from the sewer fund balance, and $147,815 from the remaining funds and special districts. Overall, the 2022 budget is fiscally sound, even though we're coming through one of the most unusual periods of time in history. The town has been able to stay under the New York State tax cap while continuing to provide the same level of service to the citizens. That is my report. The only other thing I would say before I open up the podium is that, and I want to make sure, because I think when I read it, this has a proposed 2022 tax rate. If you live in the village, your town tax rate will be $4.89 per thousand, compared to 2021 when it was $4.76, an increase of 13 cents per thousand. And if you live in the town outside the village, the 2022 proposed tax rate is $5.44 per thousand. In 2021, it was $5.30, an increase of 14 cents. To give some perspective on that, if your house is assessed for $200,000 and you live in the town of Webster outside of the village, at $5.44 per thousand, your town tax bill is slightly under $1,100 in 2022. And for the people in the room or on TV, if they're like, wait a minute, my house is around $200,000, my taxes are significantly more than $1,100. This is the town tax. This is not the county tax, nor is it the school tax. It's just the town tax. So, with that in mind, I don't know if Karen had anybody that signed up.
I can say a couple things now.
You know what, actually, Paul, let me hand it to you.
Tom had mentioned other revenues, which are very significant. After netting out the interfund transfers, our other revenues are about $10.5 million. So it's a significant piece of the budget. And the other piece of the puzzle that balances everything out is appropriated fund balance. We've been able to appropriate just under $2.1 million for the 2022 budget. In 2021, it was just over $2.2 million. So I mean, we're fortunate to have surplus at the end of 2020. The town had surplus of about $13.3 million. I good portion of that is restricted, but we do have money to help balance the budget on an annual basis. How sustainable that is going forward, everybody's guess. I'm sure it's gonna get more difficult as time progresses. But we do our best. I think overall it's been a good process. As Tom said, started back in May. Many meetings with department heads and board members, and we got it done. The tax cap limit is $20,215,756, and our total levy is $20,214,617. So we're just $1,139 under the cap, which equates to 3.35%. It's referred to as a 2% tax cap, but that's only the consumer price index portion. There's also a growth factor of 1.35, and both of those indexes vary each year. So the real cap is 3.35 for 2022.
Thank you, Paul. Now, we have pretty much almost every department head, if not every department head, is present tonight. So if anybody would like to get up on the podium, to comment on something on the budget or ask a question, I think we have a panel of people that are very suited to answer any questions because we have everybody here. And I'm glad this young lady has the Webster today, because if you live in Webster and you got this in the mail last week, you got preliminary budget on every line item in the Webster today. So can you give your name and your address, please?
Yes, my name is Ashley, and I live off of Garden Lane.
Can you give your full name, Ashley?
Ashley Teague,
Okay, and your address is?
982 Garden Lane.
Thank you.
I wanted to talk about the Webster today. I had found out in the budget year, it is going to be $43,000 in taxpayers' money. And I had to do some digging, so correct me if I'm wrong here. But this wasn't talked about with the town, wasn't talked about with you guys. You hired your friend who was printing this from out of state, and it's not being printed in state, so you're paying someone our tax money to print this outside of the state, but you run on being open government and for local businesses, but you didn't give any local businesses a chance to bid on who is printing this. So that was the main thing I wanted to talk about, because there's a lot to unpack in here that I don't have enough to say in like 5 minutes. But the other thing is the issue is the parks. We have a huge budget, and with North Parks Park is somewhere that I have a friend that frequents at that I'm at often, and like the bathrooms are never clean there. So I don't know if North Parks Parks just gets missed, but for having such a big budget, I have an issue with North Pond's bathroom. Like my friend can even take their kid in there to get it changed. There's not trash cans around, and really that's all I have for those things.
Okay.
There's a lot of things, but I know I'll miss the 5 minutes, but those are the two main things.
Thank you, Ashley.
You're welcome.
Is there anybody else that has comments or questions?
This is pertaining to the budget.
That is correct, sir. This is the public hearing on the budget. And you can state your name and your address, please?
My name is Ron Nesbitt. I live at 1075 Railway Cross. And I thank the board for this opportunity to speak on the budget tonight. But after looking at the proposed 2022 budget, one has to ask what the Webster residents are getting for a spending increase of $802,521 and a 3% increase in spending. In the last 2 years, the Flaherty administration has spent $2,106,291, or 8.1% more in spending. In 2 years, we have had a spend, spend, spend as this board's motto. We don't see too much discussion about cutting expenses. We did hear about some cleaning contracts. We heard some lawnmower contracts. We heard about the chief of police, his salary, his retirement salary, we don't have to pay anymore. So if we didn't have those savings, this 802 would probably be 900. But we did have some savings. Now, the previous administration, when they left, the budget was 26 million in 2020. And the increase that year was $331,332, or 1.29%. The amount to be raised by taxes was $310,000. In his first year of administration, the budget went up $1,303,770 in the first year. $475,000 to be raised by taxes. This year, we're up to 28 million, 148, 802,000, as I said. So we're up 2,106,000. Supervisor correctly stated, 14 cents this year, 10 cents last year, 24 cents in the first 2 years. Okay? I can tell you that the spending on employees and their wages and benefits has increased significantly since 2019. In 2019, the salary of the HR person was $65,101. After leaving the employment at Town Hall, a new HR person was hired, and he was given a salary of $90,000 and 4 weeks vacation from day one. Working the same 5 days a week and the same 7.5 hours a day. So that's $25,000 in 2021 and another $25,000 in 2022. So that's $50,000 right there. Some of the other salaries that have gone astronomical would be, let's start with the Director of Community Development, which was hired in December of 2019 as replacement for the Deputy Commissioner, Don Hauser, who was making $87,000 at that point in time. We hired the new guy in December of 2019, and that position at $60,000. Since that time, there's been a change in title to Director of Community Development, and in 2021, we paid this gentleman $90,036. That is up over $30,000 in the first year. Now this year, we're going to be at $91,500 for 2022, another $31,500. So with 2 employees alone, you've gone up $110,000 in 2 years. That is a lot of money. 2 employees. We haven't talked about the town engineer. We hired your town engineer, and last year's budget was $90,000. Now it's up to $95,880. It's over a $5,000 increase. Highway superintendent. Joe Herbst worked here for 35 years. He made, when he walked out the door, $105,328. We hired a new guy at $102,000. He has yet to take the test to make it official. He's a provisional appointment, and we paid him $102,000 a day in. Unbelievable. And then we go to the boards, the zoning board, the conservation board, and the planning board. They haven't had a raise in 2 years. Price of gas is going up. They got to drive from their house here, and you can't give them $20 more a month. When we're giving everybody else $110,000, those guys work hard. Town board got a raise, $407 a year, and we can't give the zoning board, planning board, and the conservation board a raise. Unbelievable. Unfreaking. Now the town clerk's office. I love the town clerk's office. They do a great job. I just want to show something here. They have two part-time employees that they're not bringing back. $28,091. and they put them in the full-time line, which is $31,750 more. You're gonna have to pay 15 to 16% retirement on that, which would be about $5,000. Then you got $20,000 in health care. So you just raised that position from $28,000 to $57,000. That's a $28,000 increase going from 2 part-times to 1 full-time. That's what you have to watch when you're budgeting. We had a cap. The former administration had a cap on how many employees. We just didn't go nilly-willy and hire people because the benefits are gonna kill you. Chief of Police is a great guy. I love the police department. But, as Councilman Dean told us all in the budget meeting, they took great time to understand that the new chief of police would not be getting retirement, and the town was saving money. So they paid him $13,000 more than the former chief. They're paying him $150,170. I don't know, Paul, exactly what the retirement, I'm gonna say 25%. In that area, it's about $36,000, which would be paid for retirement there. But since he's making $13,000, you save $23,000 on the whole deal. That's good. But when I look at the budget, and I think there's a mistake there, and Paul can tell me whether there is or not. The budget is up $414,000 for the police department, and another $187,000 in benefits. It's $601,000. I think there's a mistake. So I'm gonna cut off $200,000, and we'll take it down to $400,000 for this year, for 2022. Okay? Well, what are we getting? What are we getting extra? Mr. Dean didn't tell you that. He only told you he saved $23,000. He didn't tell you that the first year police chief is raising the budget $400,000.
And Mr. Nessers, I'm just telling you, I'm giving you a lot of leeway here because of your position of 24 years in government, but you're well over the 5 minutes.
It didn't say that in the agenda.
Okay, well,
It didn't say 5 minutes, it said public hearing. It's up to you.
how much more time do you have?
Or I just got,
Okay.
okay? All right. I'll get into the newspaper quickly. It was referenced before. It's up $1,000 from $42,000 to $43,000, but yet nowhere's in there says how much Mr. Polito's getting. Nowhere's in there says how much the printer's getting. And nowhere in the budget does it say how much revenue you're getting from the ads. It's not in the budget. You're getting money for the ads. Every page is a half a page ad. There is no revenue budget in the 2022 budget for that. Period. Nothing there. There's no revenue in the budget for the drug officer. Nothing. We're going to get money from the drug officer. We're paying the drug officer $160,000 a year. Where's the money for the drug officer? Nothing in the budget. Okay? It's only controlled by the police chief anyhow. So, I'll finish up. $7.5 million. We took bonds out for the sewer. $31 million. You said the tax rate or the sewer rate is going down. It will go down next year, but in years to come, it's going to be up $50 a house, from 190 to 240, as you've already mentioned. We got $11 million for Sandbar Park, another $10 to $15 million for highway garage if we decide to do that. Town of Webster is going to be in debt for years to come. Since you want me to hurry, I will say that I foiled the mortgage tax. Everybody in the world knows if you sell a house right now, you're paying a lot more. Mortgage tax money is up. As of June 30th, Town of Webster had $875,953 in mortgage tax money. You double that, you come out to $1,750,000. Paul's only budgeted $980,000, so he's got $771,000 going fund balance. You can use that money to offset the tax rate. You know you can do it. You can go to zero this year, very possible. because he's got sales tax, it's over 4 million there too. In closing, I'm gonna close. I would like to express my displeasure with the town board in not acknowledging the recent death of town attorney Roger Sedgwick after 20 years of service to Webster. I watched last week's town board workshop chaired by Deputy Supervisor Talbot and tonight's meeting chaired by the supervisor, and neither mentioned Roger's passing. I find this to be outrageous. Also in the last few months, Rod Potter, Sandy Stringer, John Hermanette, Jeanette Irwin, and just last week, Dolores, have left town employment, and this town board has not seen fit to recognize one of these hard-working employees. These employees make you look good sitting up there, and least you could do is to mention their names after they have left town service. You just provided Councilman Dean with a full-page goodbye in the Webster Today, but his 12 years of service would not be successful without these employees doing their job. This town board needs to do a better job of recognizing our town employees. I thank you for listening. I appreciate the extra time, but you can get the tax rate to 0, and you need to understand that your employees are your best asset. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nesbitt, and I will tell you this. If I was sitting in the crowd and I was watching on TV tonight, I would want to fire this town board after what I just heard Mr. Nesbitt say. I just want to give, for all the people of my age, Paul Hardy maybe the rest of the story on something. A lot of numbers were flying around from Mr. Nesbitt, and I'm somebody who has an accounting background, and I got confused. So for the layman, I can understand where it might have really confused you. But right before I finished, I said that the town tax rate this year in the budget is proposed at $5.44 per thousand. And last year it was $5.30. So the proposed budget is going up 14 cents per thousand. Last year's budget, 2021, was $5.30 per thousand. And that was up from $5.22 in 2020. It was up 8 cents. So I'm going to really make this simple. In the 2 years under, as Mr. Nesbitt said, this administration, the budgets that this administration has handled, the average proposed increase of 8 cents and 14 cents a thousand, if we add those two together, that's 22 cents divided by the 2 years. Does everybody agree that's 11 cents per thousand on average? I don't see anybody shaking their head.
Still too much.
Mr. Nesbitt's administration in his last 5 years went up 61 cents over those 5 years, which if you divide 61 cents by 5 years, that's an average of 12.2 cents. Mr. Nesbitt can shake his head, but it is facts.
It is facts, but what was the growth on the 2%?
You don't want to get into this.
You don't want to go there. You don't want to go
I
there.
just wanted to make sure that citizens
You don't want to go there, Mr.
got
Friday.
that other side of the story. There's a lot of numbers flew around. But that is a fact, what I just described. Irrefutable, unequivocal fact. So, with that being said, and I really do appreciate it, I got to tell you something. Praise, you don't learn anything from. Criticism, that's where you learn things. I appreciate Mr. Nesbitt. He is a valuable resource for me because I can count on his criticism. And I need that criticism because that's the only way that we're going to stay sharp as a town government. So I really want to thank you, Mr. Nesbitt. Now, with that being said, is there anybody else that would like to take the podium tonight?
I do.
For the budget. Yeah. Thank you, Tom. Because I heard Andy ask earlier.
My name's Tom Roth. I live at 800 Lake Road. First of all, this is the first time I've been to a budget meeting, and it was an light meeting. I'd like to know from one of the people on the board, how many people are employed by the town of Webster?
Full,
120
full-time.
full-time? And then how many part-time?
Paul,
Just a guess.
it's right around 160 right now, but it's.
All right, so really, you've got 280, you've got 280 bodies.
Yep.
All right, the one thing that hit me is the HR person that has since retired left was $65,000 a year. And now the new HR person is $90,000, which is a considerable percentage increase. And I will share with you, if this person's worked their way to gold, it's the best money you've ever spent. You got 280 people, and you're paying $90,000 for an HR person. That person can earn their keep in keeping the lawyers at bay. So these are tough times. And I heard a 2% increase in across the board for what I'll call your highway department, your other union employees, and things like that. That's a bargain right now, and it's going to get tougher. So in respect to what Mr. Nesbitt said, we got to keep our powder dry. But I think that this is going to be a challenge that the board's going to have to wrestle with for a long time. And this isn't the only thing that's going to be going on. So in my opinion, the investment that you're making in good people is going to be well worth its weight in gold. And you'll be poached, and there will be people that will be coming to you. Grab the great people and hang on to them like grim death and move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And since Tom Rupp, I'm a little bit of a kindred soul, although his business was significantly bigger and more successful than the business that I had. One thing you'll appreciate is that where the numbers were given of what the HR director made previously versus what our HR director makes now, the total HR budget has actually gone down for the last couple of years because our previous HR director, wonderful person, but needed a lot of other resources in the department, third-party attorneys to help out, as you said, Tom. And so the total budget for the HR department was actually higher. When we hired talent, we were able to take away some of those resources that we were paying for outsourcing. So the net of the department is actually less than it was. So, anybody else looking to have some fun tonight on the two? Oh, Andy. Wow. This is like karaoke night with.
You don't want to hear me sing. Andy Opart, 820 Lake Road. Just a few quick comments. Anytime I hear a government talk about what a big surplus they have, that raises my eyebrows. That tells me, that translates to prior overtaxation. Government should not have big surpluses. They should run with what they need and a small margin for contingencies. So I don't know what is restricted out of that $13.3 million. I guess I'll have to look into it a little more. Second comment, I guess, is when we talk about, hey, we're bound by contracts, we've got these increases. I understand that, but it's slightly disingenuous to talk about, oh, we're bound by contracts. I presume the town is the entity negotiating these contracts, so left hand and right hand are not that far apart. They should know what they're doing, and when they're negotiating these, keep in mind, there's a price to pay down the road. Last comment is, I think Mr. Nesbitt does have a valid point in looking not so much at the tax levy change. This particular one is apparently 1.9%. But looking at spending, change in spending, I think that really is the most important parameter to look at, looking year to year. And what is that change in spending year over year on the proposed budget?
We're at 558, 889.
In a percent basis?
1.66.
So, that's all. Again, I will commit myself to understand better about the surplus, because I had a conversation with the school superintendent some years ago about surpluses. She was very proud of the very large surpluses. And when I looked at my school tax bills, I was not as equally pleased. So, thank you.
Andy, and I can't thank you enough for saying that, because there's unspoken tonight by Paul Adams, who, by the way, the town is very fortunate to have a finance director of the caliber of Paul Adams. Paul Adams, in February of 2020, went to the Association of Towns annual meeting in New York City. Seems like a million years ago because it was before COVID, right? Came back from that meeting and said that the Association of Towns is really gonna crack down on town governments, municipalities building up their surpluses, because Andy, it is tantamount to overtaxing, right? So that led to, and with Paul's assistance, really spearheading this, for the first time, a formal fund balance policy was written and adopted by this town board, I think in late 2020.
Yeah.
So we have already started to put the parameters on, which previously was not there, of what should be the minimum surplus in the various fund balances, restricted or unrestricted, and what should be the maximum. That never existed before. And I don't know about you guys, but having that type of subjectivity puts, this board here, you might trust this board, oh, but you don't know 5 years from now, another board, if you don't have those parameters in a policy, somebody might go down to 0 or less, which I think is not good fiscal management. You gotta have some reserve. Right, Tom? You run your business on a shoestring? Don't answer it, don't write it down. And you can't also have $1 trillion in reserve. So those are some tremendous achievements, in my opinion, in the last 2 years. That, I'm very proud of what Paul and the board has done on that. Because one of the things that we are tasked with as a board is not just making decisions for today, but putting in the town in a position for 20 years to be successful. And I've made it very clear, and I've been vocal about this, I don't like the one-year budget cycle of government. I don't like the 2% cap. It gets politicized, and it doesn't really foster good fiscal management. It doesn't say, hey, let's come up with a 5-year plan. That's not how it works, right, Barry? But, Tom, businesses, you get a little longer-term plan. You budget for a year and all that stuff, but the government doesn't really foster that. And I've struggled with that, because I think there's almost a false, bar on, are you doing well? Anyway, I've said my piece. Would anybody else like to take the podium on the budget? Well, Charlie, am I right to say that we are going to close out this public hearing?
Nobody else wants to speak.
Yeah. I want to thank all the department heads who came. I really was hoping that we would have you answer some of the questions, but I'll tell you what, for people at home, whatever, we are, haven't been in private industry for 30 years. Tom, what you said on the podium earlier, and I think the board members will attest to this, we are assembling a very talented team of leaders and department heads at this time. Very talented. And the town will benefit from that. They will benefit from that. So,
We've hired 7 new department
I
heads.
think it's 7.
7 hired in the last year and a half, and every one has been a home run. Every single one.
And you've seen a lot, Barry.
I would say there's a lot of talent and a lot of forward thinking from our department heads. It's admirable. We appreciate it.
Just add that to the process. Hiring these new people has changed significantly. Supervisor Clary's direction and with the assistance of HR director. So to our department heads that are here this evening. Thank you very, very much for all your work.
And with that, the public hearing is closed. All right, Dolly. The next item up, believe it or not, is the open to the floor, for which each speaker will be allowed up to 5 minutes. And this is a general hodgepodge. You can get up and any topic you want to discuss. One thing I would, learning from past meetings, like if you're here for a variance, the fill permit, whatever, that's not, we'll get to you on the fill permit.
Yeah.
All right. So, does anybody want to take the podium for any general comments? Yes? Yes. Andy, so Andy, we are gonna do some karaoke. Sir?
No, oh wait.
Again, it's Andy O'Carty, 20 Lake Road. A giant cell tower will be in Webster for a long, long time, longer than most of us will be. Which location provides the best balance of better cell service while also protecting the Lake Road Scenic Byway and Webster property owners? Blue Sky Verizon is now pushing for the site at 833 Lake Road. But Blue Sky Verizon is also considered the Kiwanis site on Pellet Road. The Kiwanis site meets everyone's objectives in that it eliminates the Lake Road Scenic Byway visual blight, has a much less negative dollar impact on property values. It has a much better natural treescaping screening effect. They have a willing landlord. And it's been identified to be within the feasibility area that Blue Sky Verizon themselves listed in their paperwork. Furthermore, it's only 800 yards south of the proposed Lake Road site. So why did the Kiwanis site suddenly drop off the radar for Blue Sky Verizon? Well, they subsequently reached an agreement with a Lake Road property owner for a site that they prefer. But I understand that. Lake Road is easier for them, so bye-bye Kiwanis. In their original submission, Blue Sky Verizon explained away the Kiwanis site by claiming it's too far south, even though it's only 800 yards south of the proposed Lake Road site. The submission from Blue Sky Verizon had no written reports, no objective analysis. Despite numerous requests, no unbiased proof whatsoever has been provided. However, the town board repeatedly assured us, don't worry, there will be due diligence, and the board will thoroughly investigate Blue Sky Verizon's claims. Now, as a CPA, I'm familiar with due diligence and understand it requires a review of substantive and meaningful evidence to support a claim. You can't make an informed decision without it. So when I finally saw today Blue Sky Verizon's so-called response about the Kiwanis site, I was shocked to see there's no evidence. They simply said effectively, please refer to our original submission. No proof, no studies, no reports or technical analysis, nothing. If Blue Sky Verizon really did a technical analysis or a study, can't they just print a copy and send it to the board? Why didn't they? I believe the answer is because they never did any technical analysis. They want Lake Road, end of story. Now please hurry up and approve our tower where we want it. It seems that perhaps Blue Sky Verizon figures they can just kind of ram this thing through. Hey, just another small town board with some local yokels, no problem. Just put together the boilerplate template, throw in some pretty graphics, tweak it a little bit, and and we'll get what we want. So that's where we are right now. Blue Sky Verizon has refused to provide, or more likely does not have, any substantive evidence to document specifically why the Kiwanis site is supposedly not feasible. They just say, refer to our original paperwork. Well, I've gone through the original paperwork a few times, and here's what they said. This location was ruled out by the Verizon wireless engineer for being too far south. That's all. No studies, no reports, no documentation, just a self-serving assertion. So, I am hoping that the town board will honor its pledge to actually require Blue Sky Verizon to provide real, objective evidence, if there is any, that the Kiwanis site truly is technically not feasible. And I would like to have them to do that before making any final decision. So that leaves the question, will there be real due diligence on this question of a better alternative site to the proposed Lake Road location? Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Okay, is there anybody else that would like to take the podium tonight for any particular reason?
Mr. Supervisor, when we come to the cell tower hearing, is that the opportunity to present, or is it not?
Yeah, because actually, what will happen.
I'm not sure how you handle it.
Is, when we go to those resolutions, what I usually do is say, okay, is the town board have any comments or questions before I make a motion? Now, if the town board has questions or comments that are of technical nature, I would certainly hope that the people that are here, such as yourself, is that Mike right there?
Yep.
Would,
But that's only reaction to questions. I'd like the opportunity to present. So if now is the time, we'll do it now, or if you want to hold it till then.
it is not, because I want to make sure, and Andy is, I like this guy, man. This is not a public hearing tonight on the cell tower.
Okay, so I do want to be able to respond to those issues.
Well, you have every right in the world to take 5 minutes up there.
That's what I'm asking. Is now the time, or is, okay.
Go right ahead.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, good evening, Robert Bergdorf, law firm Nixon Peabody, here tonight on behalf of Verizon Wireless, and also with me for the record is Jackie Barlotta, project manager, and Mike Crosby, the RF engineer. This application was submitted June 9th. Extensive information was included with that application, which explains, and as was again verbally explained at the last meeting 2 weeks ago, why there's limited flexibility as to where these cells can be placed, the search area parameters, why the Crown Tower site and the Kiwanis site do not work, and they're virtually the same spots. And we've had a number of comments at the last meeting saying that we need to just go somewhere else. We've invited alternate suggestions from the town and from the public. None have been offered in the last 2 weeks. None have been offered since June 9th. We have explored, and would have explored, any other alternates had they been offered. And I want to go to Mr. Okar's comments about the Kiwanis site. It is entirely factually inaccurate to say that the materials do not show that it works. It is entirely factually inaccurate to say that there are no studies and no evidence submitted. He pulled one sentence out of the site selection analysis where it said it's too far south. But what he didn't say is he did not refer back to Exhibit E, which goes into great length about why the Kiwanis site doesn't work. And 800 yards is a half mile. And it was explained at the last meeting, a half mile is too far south for the reasons set forth in extreme detail in Exhibit E. In fact, the Kiwanis site is extremely close to the Crown site. And the Kiwanis site works. And it's so close to the Crown site, it's one Crown Tower. And what I don't understand is this conspiracy theory that Verizon Wireless is here to ram a site through because, for some reason, there is no hidden agenda. We don't care where we are. We could care less as long as it works from our standpoint without unreasonable cost and unreasonable delay. At 2:22 today, I got an email from the town asking for some additional information. I want to respond to that. To start, and I want to note for the record that the FCC shot clock says if the town believes any information is missing, it has 10 days from the application submission, that would be June 19th, that is the deadline, to ask for that. So by responding tonight, I want to make it clear we are not waiving any rights under the federal shot clock. Shot clock also requires that this approval process be concluded with a deadline of 150 days from the application. That's November 9th, it's only about 20 days or so. So I'm happy to respond to that. I don't want to waive any of the rights under federal law. And I'm also noting for the record, and as noted in detail in Exhibit C of the application, that the usual site plan standards, the usual special permit standards, and the usual height variance standards do not apply here. Instead, the New York State Public Utility Standard applies, and a site that works must be approved. And we don't care where it is. I can't say that enough. We don't care as long as it works without unreasonable cost and unreasonable delay, and that's the overlay of some of the federal laws. We cannot go away. We must get service here. So there are 3 issues that were raised in the email. One was the scenic byway. I don't think you were looking for any information from us, but I will note that proximity to the scenic byway is not a legitimate basis for any kind of denial. I will also note on the scenic byway, and this is from the DOT website talking about this scenic byway, that its purpose is to promote as a tourist destination regional economic development. It is also to guide implementation of the tourist development plan. And it is a strategy for enhancing economic development, job prospects, and entrepreneurial opportunities. Nowhere in there does it suggest that it is to prevent development. And in fact, by drawing tourists, there's all the more need to have effective wireless communications for businesses, emergency services, and individuals in that area. But the scenic byway, apart from that, even though it's not to stop development, is also not a legitimate basis. The second point was Kiwanis. I'm going to go back to that. And the third point was that the board asked for proof that Verizon Wireless approached 370 and 380 Whiting Road and wanted to see the letters and proof that it was done by certified mail and receipts. And I've got both the letter and the receipts, so I'm happy to leave that with the town. So that was item 3, that was item 1. Item 2, we're back for some reason to Kiwanis. And I want the board, I hope the board read Exhibit E, because I'm tired of hearing in the last meeting and at this meeting that there is nothing in there about Kiwanis, because that's absurd. Exhibit E goes in extreme detail about subservice, the RF technology, the limited flexibility, the search area that Mr. Okar says that Kiwanis is in is clearly not in that search area. It is clearly too far south based on materials that we submitted. So I think what I'd like to do, because apparently nobody's reading Exhibit E, I'd like to have Mike Crosby take his 5 minutes, if that's how we're doing this, to come up and explain what's in Exhibit E so the board can see that the Kiwanis Club does not work because it does not reach the primary coverage objectives. If it did, and it was available, without unreasonable cost and reasonable delay, we would be happy to move. We would be happy to go on the Crown Tower if it worked. They don't work. You have to have
And
RF
Mike,
service.
because that's fine. Go right ahead, Mike. Now or before we get, so 6 of this, half dozen of enough.
We're gonna get there one way.
That's right.
Well, thanks for hearing us out on this. Again, I'm Mike Crosby, the RF engineer for Verizon Wireless. And I'd like to address a few of those topics associated with the Kiwanis Lodge. And I will point out a few of the locations that they are located at in this document. This is the RF justification document, I believe you referred to as Exhibit C, correct?
E. Exhibit E.
I'm sorry. Exhibit E. So if you were to look at slide 3 or page 3, this is a project need overview slide. In this slide, the second to the last paragraph, it discusses what the objectives are for the site. These objectives are very carefully selected. They're very carefully identified based on deficiencies that exist in existing network. And so you can see in here that the intent of this site, the need for this site is to improve coverage throughout the portion of the waterfront of the town of Webster, centered along Lake Road from the intersection of Holt Road to Baker Road, and extending approximately 1 mile south along Whiting and Culver Road. That's important because if we're to entertain alternate locations such as the Quantas Lodge or the Crown Tower, which are similarly situated relative to their locations from a north to south standpoint relative to Lake Road, they're approximately half mile plus south of where we need to be. A half mile is a big deal when you're talking about a site that is only serving a total of 1 mile. That's an enormous distance. Not to mention the fact that it places us a half mile closer to our existing fund roads. And as I mentioned in the last meeting, that causes interference. So we actually suffer not only a loss of coverage along Lake Road that's needed, but we also have interference issues. So those were mentioned last time, but I just wanted to repeat that. If we take a look, and just to try to put a little bit of a picture to this information that I'm sharing with you, if you take a look at slide 8, page 8, that's the page that we have the search area identified. And I realize that this particular search area, really what you're looking at is a polygon, as was mentioned in the objectives, centered along Lake Road. And you can't see the Quantas Lodge on here, but what, as mentioned, Quantas Lodge is about a half mile south of where we need to be. It's well outside to the south of the search area. Again, the search area is the area that we need to be within in order for this site to work properly. Quantas Lodge and the Crown Tower, again, both similarly situated, and as mentioned, it wouldn't make a ton of sense to build a new tower adjacent to an already existing tower that we've already discounted. Those are both similarly not properly situated in order for us to solve this problem. So that search area helps to shed some light on where the site needs to be. And there's a lot of details in it that talks about how that search area is created. Page 9, you can see that we call out the existing Crown Tower in this slide. And you can see where the existing gap in coverage is. It's shown in the white. You can see the existing coverage we have from Plum Road in red. You can see the existing coverage we have from all the other on-air sites in this portion of the town shown in blue. And so the Quantas location is due north of the Crown Tower that's located off Urban Road. And that's a significant distance. Those both are a significant distance south of this Webster Park site. Now, I mentioned last time, and I'll provide a little bit more detail about why we need to be close to Lake Road. And this is a similar situation we have all the way through Monroe and Wayne counties and actually all along the lake shore. And that's partially because these areas are Canadian border areas relative to our coverage. So I realize, and I've grown up in Webster, so I realize we don't necessarily always think of ourselves as a Canadian border, but the reality is from an RF standpoint, we are. It's only about 35 miles to the Canadian border. Actually, it's not even that. It's only 26 miles from this site to the Canadian border. So that's not a very long distance in the world of RF. And why that's important is because companies like Verizon operate many different bands, many different spectrum bands, frequencies that are licensed by the FCC. Industry Canada regulates the frequencies in Canada. They do not, while Industry Canada and the FCC do work together, they do not regulate each other. So we're bound by agreements the FCC and Industry Canada make to prevent each other, Canada and the U.S., from interfering with each other. This isn't exclusive to the town of Webster. These are rules that apply on a nationwide standard. And there's similar rules in place for Mexico. So these frequencies that are in use are not in use for all the same things on each side of the border. For example, in the United States, the C-band frequencies that we use are being deployed for our wireless networks. In Canada, they're still being used as what are called earth stations. These are uplink portions of satellite links in Canada. In order for us to not interfere with Canada, we have to have what's called safe azimuths. These safe azimuths require us to not be located adjacent to the water, which, as we mentioned before, the water allows the signal to propagate very easily over long distances, whereas areas where there's hills or trees like we have that are inland away from the lake, and I'm talking miles inland, because remember, all Webster is within that border area, the signal is more rapidly degraded. So as we get 35 plus miles away from the border, we get into the area where it's less concerned. But this is an area of high concern. In fact, I took a quick look just to see, what do all of our other sites look like in the area? Are they all similar situated? Because as I mentioned, they were previously. So I looked at 4 Mile Creek. same configuration. The Gannett site, which I know was mentioned previously, is a new site that's been recently built along Lake Road. The configuration is going to be installed at that site, same configuration. And when I say same configuration, I'm talking about what we call a T shape, which is where we have an east sector, a west sector, and a south sector. That leaves a larger null, which is a gap in service to the north. That's in order to prevent any RF signal from traveling to the north. Plum Road site, similar situated. Centenary Shore site, which is on the north side of Lake Road, that's similar situated. Sodas Point is going to be similar situated here on site. So I look all the way along that Lakeshore Trail, and all those sites, they're all designed the exact same way with these safe azimuths. The safe azimuths, if we deploy the safe azimuths, which is necessary at Kiwanis Lodge or at the Crown Tower on Herman Road, what happens is the distance is too great. Our frequencies, the frequencies of operate, they're degraded over distance and because of foliage, buildings, hills, things like that. Lake Road is a hilly road. The terrain drops off to the lake. The primary objectives that are listed on that page 3 include Lake Road and the residences that are along the lake. It includes other things as well, but those are the critical core objectives. If we move to Herman Road at the Crown Tower, or if we move over to Kiwanis Lodge, both of those locations are too far south. The null is too great, the signal is degraded, and we end up not serving the area that this site is designed to serve. So that's, I'm just trying to, I know we went through this last time, I'm just trying to provide a little bit closer and more careful details so that you can see the difference there. If you look at slides, let's see here, let's see. If you look at slide 15, you can see where we show the difference between the proposed site and the existing Crown Tower, which again is similarly situated as the Kiwanis Lodge too far south. And you can see the gap in coverage that exists along the full length of Lake Road that is the primary objective of this site. And that is why we said the site is too far south. And that is why the proposed Webster site, Webster Park site, as proposed, is the location that we need in order to resolve problems, as mentioned in stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And my last question for the board is there anything else that the board is looking for with respect to Kiwanis? And if so, what? Especially given page 15, showing what the propagation looks like. What else specifically would you be looking for? And again, without waiving any rights under federal law with respect to shot clock, we would provide that to the town. I don't know what else the board is looking for.
Yeah, Robert, can I make a suggestion? Because we can get to item 3 and 4 on the agenda, the regular town business, relatively quickly. Why don't we say that for then, and so we can actually get to the part of the agenda where it is discussion and or question, if you want to say that about
Tom?
So,
Tom, is it possible just to ask a quick question of this gentleman, right?
I beg your pardon?
Can I ask a quick question of him?
Come on, my friend.
You have 5 minutes. Hi, I'm Parker Zach, 530 Forest Lawn Road in Webster. I just have a question as far as your service.
Dolly, our town clerk didn't quite catch.
Oh, my name is Parker Zach, Z-A-C-K. I live at 530 Forest Lawn Road. And I have no cell service. It's abominable. And I'm a medical professional, my neighbor is an anesthesiologist. We're on call, we can't get to the hospital. We don't even know. It's absolutely unacceptable. So that I think is already known. I think I came here to argue that point. I think you already know that we need it desperately. My concern is, does that tower help us? My neighbor here also. We are west. You said east of Baker? Is this what? Okay, so we're west of Baker, from Forest Lawn, or say Baker, from Baker west to Bay Road is no man's land. You can't place a call, you can't maintain, sustain a call, it's drop calls. I get welcome to Canada messages all the time. So that's, we would like to know what this is going to do for us.
The probably the closest, if you've gotten a copy of the
Yeah, we didn't have
application.
it, that's what I meant.
Okay, yeah.
Not privy to that.
And on page 10, it's showing these propagations, and maybe we can catch you offline, find exactly where your house is on this, and then Mike can explain what the service levels are.
So what
We're on the edge of the coverage.
Yeah, east of Baker, so is that like drop dead point east of Baker Road? You're, beyond Baker, you're no longer improving service, or is it questionable, fuzzy, yes and no, sometimes yes, sometimes? And if not, is there something being done to improve the area from Baker going west and up Bay Road, which is a couple miles of no means?
It would be great if we could have a few minutes after, and we can look at it in a little closer detail and talk through it. We'd be happy to.
So you might not be aware of this additional?
No, we're very well aware.
Oh, okay, that makes, that's not
We're very well aware of it, but we're working on this particular project right this time, and we'd be happy to take a look exactly where you're at, see if there's any hope that this solution is going to solve that problem as well.
So you don't know off the top of your head if this will help west?
We can't tell from this map exactly where your house is, or where your
Well,
slide
you
is.
said, you said Baker, so you said this would improve service.
Roughly from Baker, the primary
Right.
objectives for this site is Baker to Holt.
Okay, so this will not, Baker West, which
It
is.
doesn't mean that there's not going to be any overlap in service, but
Okay,
you're
guys.
in such a weak area that
Okay, thank you, Barry.
you're what we call variable coverage area. So, like I said, we'd be happy to
We
talk.
can
about
discuss
Okay,
it later. Thank you. Just wanted clarification.
Yes, no, and I'm sure you can offline.
We will, absolutely.
I know this, so I like boots on the ground. Pallet at Lake. Pallet down to Whiting is about 1.1 mile. And I think Whiting down to Bay is another 1.1 mile. Because that's the way the county road project is broken up between this year and next. Does that sound about right, Barry? Okay. Forest Lawn, which as we know is right where that train bridge that we're having taken out, is that closer, Parker, to Whiting, or is it closer to Bay?
Closer to Bay.
Back to the bay.
So the Bay and Lake is 2.2 miles away from the corner of Pallet and Lake. So you're a little less than 2 miles away. Is that correct? From Pallet and Lake. Okay. Maybe that'll help you when you have your offline conversation, Mike.
I'm sorry?
That might help you when you have your offline conversation. That Forest Lawn community, about 60 homes,
It's right there on the wall, that's our
is
community, right there.
essentially about 1.8 miles away from the corner of Pallet and Lake, where this tower is.
Right, so that's a little bit too far west for this site for the primary objectives. It doesn't mean that there's not going to be, you could be situated such that there's going to be some residual benefit, but it's not in, it's in what we call a variable coverage area. It's not part of the dedicated service for this site. It doesn't mean that we don't have other plans for that site, for that area in the future.
All right, and that's
wrong meeting.
honestly why you guys
Do you
gotta
have
go
other
offline. For people watching at home, they hear, if you're not at the podium, they don't hear a word. And there are more people actually watching this board meeting than are in this room, and we have to be sensitive to that. Please have that conversation offline, okay? Does anybody else want to get up at the podium? Should we order food, Barry?
You gotta stop asking the question.
Once again, my name is Tom Roth, I'm from 800 Lake Road. My point was made on a couple of occasions, and I'll say it again. The town board is a steward of the town of Webster. It's a beautiful piece of property we're talking about there. It's adjacent to great areas that were left and preserved with the Genesee Valley Land Trust. And I'll tell you that this has been, without a doubt, the most frustrating process for anybody to understand. I've tried to break this down in a million different ways, and I just heard tonight that it's the town's responsibility to find alternate spots if this one doesn't work. Intuitively, I have a hard time understanding why it's the town's responsibility to find a spot for private enterprise to get a tower to get more service. Intuitively, I find that as a problem. Now, I already can tell you what the answer is going to be. Well, it's public safety, and it's this, and it's that, and it's a variety of other things. And that may well be true. I'm talking about a piece of property that's a gem. I've talked about it a long time. And I have been in that area for a while now, and I have not found the cell service to be a problem. Have there been times that I haven't gotten it? Yes. There's also been times when I haven't gotten it in other places too. The facts of the matter are, you're employed, you're voted, you're elected to the town for a purpose. And for me, today, at 8:50, that purpose is to maintain the integrity of this great town. And I find it frustrating, as I said at the beginning, of why we have to find a spot for Verizon. Now, if we do have to find a spot for Verizon, then put me on a task, I'll go try and find something. I've done a lot of things in my life. I haven't done this one, but I'll address it. I'm a guy who wants to get something done. I started this process early on with the planning board, and I was told to sit down and shut up because it's going to happen. I don't believe that. I don't believe it happens like that. And if it does, I'm terribly disappointed. But the point I'm making is obvious. We have a very special spot. And if the process is that we vote for a 125-foot tower to go adjacent to that special process, Tom Ross Light will go on. This is not a hill I'm going to die on, but it is a hill that I'm going to take account of, and it's something that I'm going to remember for a while. So those are my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
And, by the way, full disclosure, Leo J. Roth is a huge customer of Verizon.
Thank you, Tom.
Lori Anderson, 810 Lake Road. I just want to add my support to both Andy and Tom for what they've said. I agree with Tom Roth in that it seems unusual that private citizens and this board should find a spot for Verizon. I want to remind the board that those 2 properties on Whiting Road, paperwork that was just submitted to show that they sent certified letters, all the information at previous meetings, and I've been at all of them, said that those were certified letters that were sent, but there was no reply. So, again, referring to the number of properties that were looked at for this particular cell tower, those should not even count, in my opinion. Addressing this gentleman in Forest Lawn that he does not have cell tower, Mr. Cosby said that, well, we will be addressing that. So this is one of future cell towers. Driving along Lake Road, I noticed the one tower that's on Slocum, that's in Wayne County, that's similar to the tower that we're proposing for this Pellet Road site. I can't visually see any other cell towers to my knowledge while I'm driving, so I'm, may have missed something. But this may be just the first link in a chain of cell towers, which is part of my concern. I do wonder what the future plans for Verizon is for this particular area. I do find it that, as Tom said, it is the town's responsibility to look ahead. Most of us are older here, and these towers will be here for many years past myself and some of you who are with us tonight. We don't get these places back. They don't naturally go back to what they were. We have to really protect the areas that we have that are beautiful. Cell towers don't come and go. I think they'll be here to stay. And we might just find a picket fence of cell towers all along beautiful Lake Road, and I really hate to see that happen. Please think carefully. This has been bounced from the board to the planning board. I was here at the first meeting when they said Don't worry, this is just step one, we're not making a decision, it's going to the planning board. I went to the planning board meeting. Don't worry, this is just the beginning steps, it's going back to the board. So here we are. And I wouldn't say that no one's taking responsibility. It's just that these little steps are so small, they seem insignificant, or that they're not going to be, it's not the decision time yet. And it just pulls us all along this trail. And again, here we are. We don't know where it's going, but it's going to grow. I think that's obvious from tonight's meeting. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I gotta ask you, Trey.
Go. Don't do it.
I guess I don't have to ask.
Lynette Phillips, 820 Lake Road, 27-year resident of Webster. I'm a physician, on-call 24/7, 365. I have perfect cell phone service. I don't know why Verizon would like to put a cell phone tower at the end of my driveway, but I've never had any issues, and I think it's important to say that. I would also like to say that I think the explanation based on the exhibit E is somewhat of a conflation between the Crown Tower location and the potential Kiwanis location. And I still don't think that the explanation is clear as to why that's not an acceptable, albeit may not perfect by their standard, alternative to the location that would deface Lake Road. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're running out of people. Anybody else want to go? How about any? Okay. Well then, I know this is gonna seem mundane, but the next item up is the minutes to be considered for approval. And Dolly, I reviewed the September 23rd, 2021 workshop minutes. And I make a motion that they be approved.
Second.
Supervisor Flaherty?
Aye.
Councilman Dean?
Aye.
Councilman Cahill?
Aye.
Councilwoman Thomas?
I'm going to abstain because I was not present.
Okay. And proving that we are hiring phenomenal people. My good friend here, Dolly McGuire, came in, was it Monday or Tuesday, and said, Supervisor Flaherty, I have really prided myself on always having the last board meeting's minutes out to the board on time to review so we could approve them at this board meeting. The October 7th minutes, where we had the public hearing on the cell tower, Dolly's got a war and peace that she's still working through. And she apologized that she did not have those minutes ready for us to review tonight.
Understand?
Isn't it though?
Yes.
Deputy Supervisor Cataldi?
Yes.
Okay, next up, I know this for a fact, and I saw her with the milk crate of bills. Is that what that was?
It's something like that, yes. I did review all the bills and found everything to be in order. I would make the motion that we approve paying those bills.
Second.
Councilwoman Calvi?
Aye.
Councilman Cahill?
Aye.
Councilman Dean?
Aye.
Supervisor Flaherty?
Aye. And I went through the prepaid warrants as submitted by Paul Adams, our Director of Finance, and make a motion that we approve those.
Second.
Supervisor Flaherty?
Aye.
Councilman Dean?
Aye.
Councilman Cahill?
Aye.
Councilwoman Calvi?
Aye.
All right, the next two items up are our Director of Finance, Paul Adams. You can kind of give an explanation.
We have some 2021 budget transfers. There are quite a few, most of them are relatively immaterial, but it does contain monies to pay for host community agreement settlement, basically a tax assessment case. Covers the town hall paving project. I don't know if you noticed, but the front of the town hall, the sidewalks were recently redone by our also the transfers cover some police retirements. We budgeted for 2, but as it turns out 5 police officers have retired thus far in 2021. And also overall fuel costs are up, no surprise there.
Thank you. Okay, then, does the board have any comments or questions about Paul's explanation of those items and the documents that were supplied? The only thing I would say, since tonight was the 2022 budget public hearing, budget transfers are essentially a net zero, the way it works. Is that correct, Paul?
That is correct.
And anybody who looked at the Webster today and saw the line items of the budget for 2022, only in government, when you approve the budget, that is by law the appropriation line item for that. That's how much money you can spend in that line item. And I would have bet you, how many line items do you think are in our typical overall budget?
Oh, it's gotta be 250, 300?
I think it's more than that.
Could be more than that.
When you break out some of the sub-accounts in there,
Oh, yeah. Some of the special districts.
point being, if you approve the budget for $1,000 on a certain line item, and something happens during the year that now you know it's gonna be $1,200, you're breaking the law if you pay more than $1,000 on that, if you go to $1,200. So we monitor that and see if other line items that maybe we had $500 on, and we're like, oh, that's only gonna be at $100 for the year, something happened to make that less. So we just do the transfer from the one that's gonna be less to the one that now is gonna be more. The net effect is 0. Is that about right, Paul?
Yes.
All right, with that being said, I make a motion to approve the 2021 budget transfers as presented by the Director of Finance.
Second.
Supervisor Cleary?
Aye?
Councilwoman Catali?
Aye.
Councilman Cahill?
Aye.
Councilman Dean?
Aye.
And I make a motion to approve the 2021 budget amendments as presented by the Director of Finance.
Second.
Supervisor Cleary?
Aye?
Councilman Dean?
Aye.
Councilman Cahill?
Aye.
Councilwoman Catali?
Aye.
Okay, next up on our regular town business is potential motions, resolutions for a special use permit related to a proposal of the telecommunications tower at 833 Lake Road. And one after that is a motion, potential resolution for a height variance for the proposed 125-foot tall telecommunications tower at 833 Lake Road. Now, usually when I come to these, I always say, does the board have any questions or comments prior to me making the motion? Tonight, we had the rare opportunity to have about 40 minutes amongst 7 speakers that was maybe a lot of what would have come up in questions and comments from the board. However, I don't know if that encompassed the totality of what the board members had as questions. And I do want to seek some counsel from our town attorney, Charlie Genesi, on a couple of items here too. So, before I open it to the other board members, I will say this. After our public hearing on the 7th, which was of October, 2 weeks ago tonight, which I think, I don't know how many steps in the process between town board and planning board, but the town board first heard about this proposed tower on July 15th, so a little over 3 months ago. And I think it was Nanette or Laura who said, when she talked and said, don't worry, don't worry. I don't know if that was the exact words, but we did really home in on that night on July 15th. It became a pseudo-public hearing when you stay very, even though it wasn't a public hearing. There is perception and there is process. And I understood the perception of the people that were against this tower that night. When I heard their stories, I understood that perception. But I also told them that night, it's for videotape and all that in these meetings, that there is a process. And I think that process has followed out, Town Attorney Genesi, exactly how it is supposed to, at least by law. Now, the due diligence which as Andy said, he's an accountant and I come from accounting, due diligence can have a subjectivity to it. One man's or person's perception, if you want to call it, that they did some thorough due diligence, another person could say they mailed it in and were lazy. So I'm going to save all the things I've said at prior meetings of the due diligence that I think this town board has done in this process. That due diligence went right up to today. And when I looked at the notes and the open topics issues that I couldn't get my mind around, I asked 3 questions today to Attorney Bergdorf and to our staff, like Josh Artuzo. And those 3 questions were around, I think, 3 things that I think Attorney Bergdorf mentioned. 1, scenic byway. Now, scenic byway has been mentioned so many times in these meetings and in letters and in emails that I wake up at night, scenic byway, scenic byway. Josh Artuzo, I had asked if you could opine and find some information from the town of Ontario and when they went and put their tower in last year and what they found out or decided on scenic byway and how a tower on the, what I assume is the south side of Lake Road, is affected by the spirit and law, or whatever you want to say, of scenic byway. Do you have anything on that?
Yes, we spoke with the town engineer over at the town of Ontario regarding their process and their understanding. They provided us with some information that they collected when going through their process. And essentially, as the attorney mentioned earlier, the main intent of that program is allocating of federal funds and tourist development. It's to protect a scenic view shed, and in the case of the Great Lakes Trail and this section of scenic byway, that resource is Lake Ontario, which is on the north side of Lake Road. And essentially, basically the Great Lake Seaway Trail, the one resource that's been identified in the plan is Webster Park. And this proposed site is approximately a mile to the east, or to the west of Webster Park. So that's the info that we obtained earlier this afternoon.
Okay. The second thing that I asked about, that I was still getting my mind around, because I got calls and I got emails and information on Kiwanis. What was the due diligence on Kiwanis? And I think that is already in 40 minutes of time been explained with Schedule E and the different items on that. I also, for full disclosure, Kiwanis, who must have gotten a similar letter to what the Bowens got at 833 Lake, what the people got at 370 Whiting. The people at Kiwanis were interested in negotiating a lease until it was found out that the site did not work, and thus there was no pursuit of that. Is that correct? Is that a good way to describe it, Attorney?
Yes, that is correct. The site acquisition person.
Okay.
Yes, that is correct. The site acquisition person will go out with the search area and will look outside the search area. Sometimes you can stretch. And then they will blanket that, get it back to the RF engineers, who will then review all of it. And the idea here is to do it in a pack like that, because timing is always important.
Sure. Okay. So, as was on October 7th, Mike Crosby from Verizon spoke at that time about the RF and all that at Kiwanis. To certain people, there wasn't enough sufficient evidence, documentation of a study or whatever that supported that. Mike has gotten up here tonight and gotten into more detail on Schedule E of the original submission package. I'm going to go back to what I said before. One person's incredible due diligence is another person's lazy way. I'm not here to determine, if you want to call it, what everybody's going to interpret that. One thing I will say about Kiwanis, and I will say it about the third item, which is the Whiting Road. If Kiwanis did work, or if the Whiting Road people responded and said, we want in, each of those locations abut our trail system and donated land from various families in this town. It's been brought up a lot in the last 3 months that it's a terrible thing that we would put a tower abutting these natural resources and these trails we have. Unless I'm missing something, every site that was looked at and proposed and gone to see if people were interested in putting it there and or if the RF worked, they all, that I know of, abutted either the Whiting Reserve or the Gosnell. Is that a correct statement? Once again, Attorney Burbank, or I
Yeah.
mean,
Yes, that's correct.
okay. So now I go to the Whiting. As I think Nanette or Laura said in previous conversations here, there was no reply. Once again, a subjective term. There was a certified letter sent in 2016 to the owners of 370 and 380 Whiting. If people understand how certified letters work, they signed that they got the letter. They did not reply to what the letter said, which is very one-page, unequivocal in its interpretation. Are you interested in having a cell tower on your land? Would you like to talk to Verizon about negotiating that? One man's interpretation of due diligence and how to follow up in sales, if you want to call it, Tom, is another person's.
Don't bring me into this.
I'm just saying.
Don't bring me into this.
Okay. I think it's reasonable that if they did not reply to it, that is tantamount to them saying they're not interested. However, I got in my car today and I drove down to Whiting. And you're right, Barry. I'm not surprised when they built Whiting that it's got a compound feel. They got it fenced in. They don't, whatever. But that 370, 380 Whiting, which is on, I would say, the east side of Whiting. From Whiting to Lake, which is about 0.2 miles, I think there are 15 houses that I count. So, and it abuts the Whiting Reserve. So that's what I looked into today.
Can I add something?
I'm done, actually.
I was very concerned as well that there was just no response from the Whiting Road residents. And I wanted to see something that said they didn't want it, I wanted something in writing. But when I looked at the letter that you brought tonight, the last sentence of that letter says that if we do not receive a reply, now keep in mind that they did sign for the letter to receive it. It said if we do not receive a reply, we will assume that the answer is no. It couldn't be more clear. So I'm feeling a little bit better about that. I want to thank you for bringing that to us so that we can see that.
Are we open for discussion?
I'm done. I looked into my three things
Okay,
that
I
I
have
couldn't
a
get my head
question.
around.
Through all of this and through reading various articles and internet things and this and that, somewheres I think I saw something that said that the FCC can trump any decision we make here.
There are several layers of laws when it comes to cellular tower placement. I was involved actually in one in 1993, the Rosenberg case, and that's where we got the Court of Appeals, our highest court. So it's state and federal law. On the state level, the courts deemed cellular towers public utilities for purposes of zoning. And what that means is that your usual special permit standards, your usual area variance standards, you're probably familiar with those, use variance standards, none of those apply. They get thrown out. Instead, the inquiry of the board at the state level is the town has to allow a facility that works from an RF standpoint. However, that doesn't mean that the town can't suggest, can you go here, can you go there? And if it still works, and we can move there because the land is available without unreasonable cost or unreasonable delay, and it's not wetlands, so it's constructible, we have to move. So that's the give and take. Can't say no, it's got to be within the area that works, but within that, the town can help direct other places. And this company, there's no hidden agenda. If it works, and those without unreasonable cost or unreasonable delay, we moved it. So that's the federal level. So the typical standards don't apply when you have balance exams. And on a federal level, the 1996 Telecom Act came out. And it basically said you can't, there's a whole host of additional impositions, if you will, on local government. Again, you can't say no, you can't treat providers differently. You can't say, well, AT&T's got service, so you don't need it, Verizon. There's a whole bunch of things. And then there's been regulations fairly recently of the shot clock because towns were taking too long. So they wouldn't say no, they wouldn't say yes, and things went on and on. So the FCC put in certain shot clock requirements depending on whether it's co-location or new tower. In this case, new tower, it's 150 days. And there are other laws as well. But the usual laws that apply, the usual standards that you're so familiar with in zoning are not the ones that are applicable here. This is 30 years worth of case law that has been, and statutory law that's been built up in order to get this essential service deployed rapidly and properly.
Okay, one other question is that my understanding from everything that Mike has said and going through this, your proposal here several times, that this is really a tower that is going to really affect a very small area. It's specific to this area. That tower needs to be there to handle this area.
Yeah, and maybe I didn't explain that well enough last time, but to be real clear, the reason it's called cellular is think of a honeycomb grid. These things don't boom all over. They've got to fit within that cell and not go beyond the cell because then they interfere, but they need to cover that cell.
So and I was just leading into, stating that I understand that, and I was leading into this question. What brought you to the decision to build a tower here? Was there a great outcry for service in this area?
Oh, this particular cell.
Yeah, for this particular, so
yeah.
what made you decide to come build a tower?
Yeah, well, under the FCC license, the company has to get adequate service to its entire license area or it risks losing its license. So it does have to get into all the places.
What has taken so long? This was for as long as I can remember, since cell phones have been active. I've heard the various emergency service people, police, ambulance, fire, and all that say that there's no service on Lake Road. Why all of a sudden?
Resources. For 30 years, I have been doing almost nothing but building out cell towers. Week after week after week, and we're still at it. It's simply a matter of resources. And some of the decisions, and Mike, you'll know this better, some of the decisions have to do with level of service, has to do with what they call POPs, it's population density and so forth. There's a whole bunch of reasons as to what gets ranked, but eventually the intent and the requirement is to get to every place. Why this one now? Why was it sooner?
You're building this tower is because of a requirement by the government to do so.
You know, under FCC license, yeah, we have got to cover, Mike.
Yeah, that's certainly part of the reason, but your question regarding the specific location and why now is driven by the demand on the network. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of areas we'd like to improve coverage, but why not this one or why not that one? We're driven by the demand on the network. So if you're taking a look in this our justification document, you can see we included traffic insurance. And those show overloaded sites in the area, for example, Plum Road. When we look, we have access, we can see where the traffic is being generated from. Traffic meaning the calls in the network, the drops, the port throughput, all the things that our customers are experiencing. We can identify and prioritize where those areas are. This is that next spot that we need to be in to fix the next biggest problem in the network. So we brought up Lake Road. I know Lake Road, it's been problems along Lake Road. It's partially due to the terrain, partially due to the proximity to what we call the Canadian border from an RF standpoint. And we're working, just like you see the site that's gone up out in Ontario, We've done centenary shores recently. We're working to fortify all the way along that lake area where we're having these issues. So this isn't the only one, but it is one of several. And one of the things was mentioned before is a picket fence site. It's not a picket fence. We're building these sites right, and we're trying to get the right amount of service out of them and still have those fit into the area. And I would offer that I believe that this is a very modest site for the area, especially relative to a lot of the other sites that are in town, some of which, like at the bus garage near Willing, we're at 195, 196 feet on that site. There's a tower at Holt Road and Plum Road at the church. It's 170 feet tall. It's got red and white. It's got lights on the top, guy wires. That's right in the middle of a residential area. This is an orchard, backed up to the woods in a relatively large parcel. This is a really ideal location relative to a lot of situations we get ourselves in where the service is needed. This is relatively a good situation from a land use standpoint. So for us, it allows us to be in a position we need to be to serve that area that's putting demand, both from poor performance that the existing customers are having, and also the overloaded demand centered on a weak area. So this is the type of spot that we need to be in order to fix that problem.
One more question real quick. This isn't about whether you should build it or not. I just had a question looking at this. Your utilities are outside the fenced area.
That is not my department, I apologize. So
Your transformer and your electrical box is outside the fenced-in area. Why is that?
I think it's for access to the utility company, but I can double check that, I don't know.
It just seemed odd to me.
Yeah, the equipment shelters are typically inside. So I
Yes,
don't know
the
if there's a
equipment,
meter on it.
Verizon's
There could be a
equipment
meter on
pad
the outside.
is inside, yeah.
There may be a meter on the outside, but the equipment is on the inside.
It's a transformer, I think it's.
Well, I think that the utility companies require the transformers to be more accessible.
Okay, that's one point I was wondering, never mind. We're good.
That makes sense.
I've got a question for Mr. Berghoff. In regard to the federal legislation, in which there's this the consideration that just being utility were limited in the standards that we can impose. Does that apply also to the variance for the height?
Yes, it's that
In
particular.
your opinion?
It's not in my opinion, there's case law, and it's state law, though. That's not the federal so much. There is an element of that for the federal law, but that particular, the change in standards is primarily the Rosenberg case and the cases that were cited, that were developed since then. And Rosenberg was in 93, I believe. And that's the one that imposed the public utility standard. And there are a lot of public utility cases, a lot of cell tower ones since 93, but also other ones, other public utility cases before zoning, before and after the Rosenberg case in 93. And that talks about exactly that.
But what if you came in and you wanted a 200-foot tower? You're saying that the town could not
Yes.
oppose that, could not stop it? Could not deny a variance?
You could not deny that variance if the utility came in, improved the need. So if we came in and showed the network, showed the other cells around it, showed that we needed to have 200 feet in order to fill the cell, in order for the network to work properly, then the answer is no. If, on the other hand, there was another solution, without a reasonable cost of reasonable delay, then we would have to go to it. But
So
sure,
we can still apply standards?
you can, not the area variance standard. And we showed that we meet those anyway, but it's not the area variance standard. The standard, you can apply a standard. The standard is one of need. And that's what Rosenberg says, and all the other public utility cases. Is in this instance, the standard that has to be applied is one of need. Does the utility reasonably need it in order to provide a safe and effective service? And that's what Exhibit E is. That's what the network is, showing the different cells and so forth. But we have gone to many towns where we've had to have a 250-foot tower, a 300-foot tower in the old days, and the height variances had to be approved.
My concern is the standards we have for the variance, whether we can get into the standards for the granting of special use. The standards are 9524B, which you alluded to in your papers. They're very similar to standard zoning. So you're saying that those are no longer valid? Or they can't?
For this, what we always do is we show that we meet the traditional standard because we just always have done that. To give towns a comfort level, we also meet the traditional standards. However, If we fail to meet the traditional standards, or you don't even have to look at the traditional standards, Rosenberg supplants the traditional standards for utilities, including cell towers. And it's a very settled law, again, since 1993 in New York State. Federal law does a whole bunch of other things as well, but that particular question is primarily New York State law.
In your experience, do other towns have similar standards for variances for cell towers?
A lot of them will refer to the typical area variance standards, yes. A lot of them will refer to the typical special permit standards. And so we show that we comply with those. A lot of them are modified for cell towers. And they're legitimate questions as well. It's not like we can just avoid all regulations. So for instance, if a town says, look, we want fencing, we want to have landscape, you should try to co-locate, show us, it goes back to you, show us you can't co-locate, because you can co-locate on something to avoid a tower, then you don't need the tower. So there are standards like that, but they, except for like the site plan type ones, landscape and so forth, the big ones, the height variance, where and how tall, that all is.
My concern obviously is whether or not our legislation is obsolete. That's my concern. Because the legislation of most of the municipalities due to the Rosenberg and the following cases.
Yeah, very few incorporate Rosenberg directly into the ordinance. And very few ordinances across the state that I can think of would have that. But that's law.
And I didn't draft this one was in existence before I got here, and I've been here a long time, so it's been around a while.
In terms of height, I mean, it's, one engineer used to say, look, it's got to be just tall enough to reach the ground. And that's because it's got to be a particular height. Remember that flashlight, it comes up, and you don't want it too tall either. If it's going to interfere, it's got to come down that coverage footprint that flashlight comes in. So again, the question is, it's got to be built to the height that's needed, and there is no advantage or reason for the company to build it taller than is necessary in order to get to the edge of the cell. If they build it taller, it's not going to help. In fact, it's going to hurt because it'll interfere with neighboring cells. So it's got to be tall enough, and yet not too tall.
Thank you.
Have you answered that?
I don't have any further questions.
John? Okay, then Charlie, if that is the only one.
Well, let me just explain.
Yeah, please do.
All right.
Standards.
I prepared it's really, I'll call it sort of a prepared resolution in favor of granting it. If that's the want of the board, if you don't, it's not, there's no issue, obviously, to follow. But I set forth all the various meetings, the various approvals, the publications, et cetera, in the resolution. Basically, what the resolution states is that after the public hearing and after the planning board's positive recommendation, the board will, and it's also under secret, this is type 2, that the town board would grant it based on the criteria set forth in our chapter 95, particularly 95.12. I included a paragraph if you want to do this, if you are inclined to do it. Also granting a variance within the resolution. I did that because in the past we haven't had a lot of these. We did have one.
Talking the height variance?
The height variance. We had one that actually involved it on town land, the Works and Works. We did that again. There was a little controversy, however, in that. There was a height that was actually larger, it was going under the 50-foot tower. So, what I'm saying to the board is that if you are inclined to grant a special use permit, you have a resolution. You can
Last Thursday night, at a town board workshop, the deputy supervisor Patel oversaw. One of the topics of discussion was, I think this concept that Attorney Berga came up with, the shot clock. And if I understand it correctly, a new tower, the shot clock is 150 days from formal application, but changes to an existing tower are 60 days, is that correct?
It's 60 or 90 depending, but
Okay.
most co-locations are 90, some are 60, under 64 or
Right,
90, or 150.
Okay, and last Thursday night, and Josh, had the board members who were here, because I tuned into that workshop, Facebook Live, but I came in after that discussion. I think that was about the shot clock on existing towers here in town, is that correct, Josh? And
Yes,
Ed?
that's correct.
Okay,
Yes, and I believe future. Or no,
No, existing.
just existing.
Yeah. But, so that was, and Josh, before that workshop, before we, the concept of the shot clock, that was the first time I had heard it, and we really, because of the workshop discussion, it was about some existing towers here in town, that there were modifications that wanted to be made, and in more words or less, we had heard from, you know, the applicant, whatever, you know, don't forget, you got 60 days, you can't kick this can down the road. Is that essentially what we're talking, right?
Yes, it's called an eligible facilities request.
Okay.
And it applies to existing towers.
Yeah.
There's nothing like that that applies to towers being built in the future?
The new ones we heard tonight has 150 days
To be
shot
built,
clock
to be built.
to be decided on from
Yes.
application
Yes,
date.
but if it should need some sort of change in 5-10 years.
The 60 days.
There's really three different levels of shot clock. There are eligible facility requests under 6409, relatively recent, and that's where you're going on basically modifications, you're not increasing the height, things like really the easiest ones. And those actually cannot be turned down. And it just flat out cannot turn them down. And then when you've got a new co-location or a new tower, they are 90 days and 150 days respectively, from time of application to conclusion.
That answers my question, thank you.
Yeah, and you might as well stay up there. I don't want you, you got your 10,000 steps in yet? So this 150 days, I think you said earlier, because of the date of the formal application here, it's November 9th.
Yes.
So, if that's accurate, all right, and I have no reason to not believe it is, we can do a couple of things here. One, we're missing a board member. I don't know if that board member will be able to be back present for the November 4th town board hearing, which is still within the 150 days. We could take 2 more weeks to maybe, I mean, we've got, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that has been dumped previous on us, and there's some other things that are now in front of us that if the board has some more questions and would be more comfortable either A, with a full board voting on a resolution about this, and or would like to get some more information, we could do this November 4th. However, we could do this tonight. Because one thing I want to go on, right, if we decide to move this to November 4th, and correct me if I'm wrong, Attorney Genesi, there is nothing that says in our agendas by law that we have to put in an agenda item that says you get 5 minutes at the podium. Is that correct?
There's nothing that says we have to, or?
Correct.
Yes.
We do that as a courtesy. All right? I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not putting on the agenda on November 4th 5 minutes at the podium. Because I do not want another hour and a half on this. If the board decides that they want 2 more weeks to ask a few more questions, to have Attorney Genesi have some more time to look at federal law, standards, this, that, talk, all that, understand this, when we come here on November 4th, it will be tight. It will not be 40 minutes of speakers, and we will go then. Because I also want to understand at that point, what happens on November 10th, on the day 151, if this board doesn't make a decision? Do you know the answer to that, Chairman?
I want to hear from Mr. Burko.
It goes to federal court, and the federal judge grants the permit, essentially. We bring a lawsuit to federal court.
No way to get rid of it, is it?
Well, how do you?
So,
No,
I just want to comment on
Go ahead, Jen.
your statement where you said that if we push this out 2 weeks, that the public will not be allowed to speak on this topic.
The public hearing closed on this, John, 2 weeks
I
ago.
understand that.
It did.
I want to comment for a second. So, we all have an opportunity to do more additional research should we push this off 2 weeks. Well, I would presume that perhaps the people that live in that direct area that will be directly impacted by this cell tower, may be doing some additional research too, and may have some additional questions. So by prohibiting them from speaking during the typical public portion for 5 minutes, in my opinion, I don't think that's fair. That's how I feel on that subject. That's from one board, that's all.
And you know I respect your opinion on that.
Yeah, just wanted to voice it.
And I would say this, if the people that are not for this come up with some documentation, new evidence, and not just getting up there, and I don't mean to be rude on this, but saying the same thing for the 5th straight time in a meeting, I'm not interested in that. And I don't mean to be crass or anything, I'm not interested in that. If there's new evidence, you have some talented people. Marie's not here, she's a paralegal. Andy, you're talented. Tom, you're talented. We have a doctor. If you have new evidence that the board needs to consider on a decision, if we don't do that tonight, I would suggest you get that documentation to us.
What evidence could they possibly come up with other than another site?
Jerry, I don't know. I don't have an answer for that.
I feel kind of bad because Ms. Anderson had said that she felt like this whole process, that we were pulling them along on the trail of this. And we've lengthened this trail in order to do our due diligence and to hear from everyone and really carefully examine this. So should we decide to put this off till November 4th, I don't want you to think we're still pulling you along on the trail. It's because we're trying to uncover everything we possibly can to make what is going to be a very difficult decision.
I'd like to say
I don't
something.
see where there's anything else to discover.
No, this is not a public hearing. I gotta
It is a
have,
public
I gotta keep some, you know.
1 minute.
Let's put it this
1
way.
minute.
No, Tom,
This,
no, you
you
have to
asked
sit
about
down.
pulling me along.
You know what?
This whole thing's been pulled along because it's federal anyway. What's the difference?
Yeah.
Okay.
What is the absolute difference? It's just been a waste of everybody's time. For God's sakes.
That's why I asked the question.
I agree with you, Barry. There's no reason to talk anymore. It's done. We're not done.
Because we have 4 board members tonight,
Good night.
what is what happens if we vote tonight and it's 2-2?
Then it fails, it's not, you won't have, the permit is not granted. You need 3 members, you need 3.
Well, and this is the thing. We have done a lot of due diligence on this. We've spent a lot of time on this. You know, some people perceive it as dragging along. I can't, if we're gonna do this the right way, I gotta tell you something. I need 5 voting members. I need 5 voting members.
You may not have 5 on the 4th. You can't promise the bill's gonna be here. I don't think Bill has any intention of coming down here before Christmas.
In all fairness, we need to let everyone know he's out on a surgical.
Right, yes, he's out, he just had to be replaced this past week.
Yes.
You know what?
We have to vote the table anyways.
Okay, so Supervisor Flaherty is making a motion, a resolution of the Webster Town Board granting special use permit for a communication tower at 833 Lake Road and a height variance of 125 feet for said tower. At a regular board meeting, the Webster Town Board of the Town of Webster, Monroe County, New York, held at the Town Board Meeting Room at 1002 Ridge Road in the town of Webster, New York, on the 21st day of October 2021 at 7:30 p.m. were present Supervisor Thomas Flaherty, Councilman Barry A. Dean, Councilwoman Patricia T. Cataldi, Councilman John J. Cahill. The following resolution was offered by Supervisor Flaherty. Whereas Blue Sky Towers 3 LLC and Bell Atlantic Mobile Systems LLC, 352 Park Street, Suite 106, North Reading, Massachusetts 02184, seek to construct and operate a wireless communications tower at 833 Lake Road in the town of Webster. And whereas specifically a 125-foot tall communication tower is being requested for the property at 833 Lake Road in the town of Webster to remedy the service deficiencies as set forth in the applicant's site plan analysis as attached to its application. And whereas this project was initially before the town board at its regular board meeting of July 15, 2021, at which meeting the town board referred the application to the planning board for special use permit and site plan review. And whereas the affected lands are in a large lot, single-family residential district, and whereas the code of the town of Webster, chapter 95, required the town board to send a referral to the planning board for this project for the planning board's review and recommendations regarding the issuance of a special use permit and site plan approval. And whereas pursuant to the Webster Town Code, chapter 95, communications tower is a permitted use in a large lot, single-family residential district upon issuance of a special use permit by the town board. And whereas the concept plan and application have been received by the town board, and whereas Webster Town Code section 95-11 subchapter B requires site plan approval by the planning board under Webster Town Code chapter 228 article 4, and whereas the town board referred said application to the town of Webster Planning Board for its review and recommendation by its resolution of July 15, 2021, whereas the planning board did complete its review and issue its determination on August 17, 2021, and whereas the town board by resolution of September 16, 2021 scheduled a public hearing to be held on October 7, 2021 to consider the above application, and whereas the notice of public hearing was published in the Webster Herald on September 22, 2021 and was posted on the town bulletin board at 1000 Ridge Road, Webster, New York, and on the town website and social media platforms. And whereas an environmental assessment form has been received and reviewed by the town board prior to its July 15, 2021 meeting. And whereas the members of the public were heard in regard to this proposal for a special permit at the town board's regular meeting of October 7, 2021. And whereas the planning board by its resolution of August 17, 2021 submitted a report of its findings to the town board and made positive recommendation for a request of the applicant to the town board. And whereas the town board has received and reviewed the environmental assessment form. Now therefore, be it resolved that the proposed action is a type 2 action on the New York State Environmental Quality Review Act, known as SEEKR. That the town board of Webster has assessed the potential environmental significance of the proposed action, and the same will not have a significant impact on the environment based on criteria established by the State Environmental Quality Review Act, SEEKR, and regulations thereto. As such, the town board of the town of Webster has determined its specific action herein as precluding further review under SEEKR. 3. Sufficient reason appearing therefore the requirement of the Webster Town Code section 95-10 that the maximum height of this communication tower of 100 feet be permitted of this tower to extend 125 feet in height. 4, sufficient reason appearing there for the requirement of the Webster Town Code, section 95-12, subsection D2, that a monopole or guided tower instead of a freestanding communications tower be used, permitting this tower to be freestanding. 5, the town board finds and determines that the proposed communication tower meets the requirements and standards of the Code of the Town of Webster, section 95-12, for the issuance of a special use permit, and thus grants a special use permit subject to the conditions and dimensional requirements set forth by the planning board as set forth in the letter to the planning board dated August 17th, 2021. That is my motion.
Second.
Supervisor Flaherty?
Aye.
Councilman Dean?
This has been a really difficult decision for me because I do see the need for the tower in the area because it's always been needed, all up and down the Lake Road. But I've seen no support. In all of these meetings, I've seen no support for this pole. Nobody's come forward and stood up and said, we need it, other than you. But you live down the other end of the road. I just haven't seen it. But I know if we vote this down, we're just gonna end up in court. Aye.
Councilman Cahill?
Nay.
Councilwoman McCauley? I would agree with Councilman Dean that this is a very difficult decision. I will say that I did receive 2 emails from residents on Lake Road who told me that they wanted it. Now, unfortunately, those people don't come to the meetings. We don't hear from them, but I did get emails from Silveri. I did hear from a couple residents. I certainly understand the residents' concerns who live in that area. I'm not sure if you noticed, but I came down Lake Road today and I actually spent quite a bit of time sitting in front of their homes and looking across at the property.
Yes,
And I drove all around it. And, you know, I understand why you don't want it there. Can't say that I blame you. But I also look at where we are in today's world and that people are getting rid of their landlines. People are more and more relying on their mobile carriers. We live in a different world than we did before, maybe even 10 years ago. And I don't come upon this decision easily, but
I'm glad that Barry and Patty gave some elaboration on their aye. I was so quenched or whatever from reading the resolution. There's been so much said since July 15th at one of the meetings, and I don't remember which one, I did tell everybody, I went to 40 houses within a half a mile east and west of Lake and Pellet, and I went south on Pellet a half a mile to Shangri-La and talked. Well, I went to 40 houses. I did not go to your house. I did not go to your house. I knew how you felt. The houses I went to, and I think it's in the record, there were several people that were very much for this. So Barry, I appreciate they didn't come in, you know, but I also would say, unfortunately, and this is something that has frustrated me about being in government after private business, is that the people that do come forward, and God bless you, are the ones that are against things. The people that are for things usually don't come out and pass. Patty, you've been on the board a dozen years, Barry, you have been. Is that essentially how it usually goes?
Yeah, a lot of the time, just, you know, neighbors don't want to get into it with their own neighbors.
That was said to me at doors. I want it, but I also don't want to have a Hatfield and Boyce situation, an actual line, so we passed it. Okay, next up on the agenda is a resolution to approve a fill permit at 924 Lake Road. The good news is that we're so far into the meeting that erosion and the movement of the glaciers, you don't need the permit anymore. Land has filled it in.
So I don't have to go through it?
Well, when you go home and take a picture, you're gonna see that you got a mountain there.
no, come on.
No, you most certainly do. So, you could give me.
I'm Scott Hepler, I'm representing Jason, or Justin Coopy, for the fill in at 924 Lake Road. So we want to bring in approximately not a weighty thing for the town. The homeowner just wants to be able to have better use of his yard. He has no backyard because it's on a bluff, not going down to the lake. And the front yard is basically like a bowl. You know, and we're gonna maintain just the drainage that's already there. There's underground drainage there, and then the way we're going to slope this out, it's gonna send the water, the actual top groundwater, down where it's already going down the gap to the lake.
Mary Harrington, the town engineer, has given a letter to the board members on this. The board members have any questions on this?
No. Good with it, highway's good with it. They've all done their due diligence.
Man, I'm gonna miss you.
We're about an hour after my bedtime.
Well, well, tell you what, I'm gonna make a motion to approve a fill permit at 924 Lake Road in Webster.
Supervisor Flaherty?
Aye.
Councilman Cahill?
Aye.
Councilwoman Feldy? Aye. Councilman Dean?
Aye.
All right.
Now, we better be sure whether this gentleman needs to come back and then we can rebuild. The neighbor.
Again, we're gonna put 100 yards over there.
I guess it's up to the town
You know,
board.
I mean, it's minimal, and what it's gonna do, it's actually gonna blend 924 into his yard to make it drain nicer.
Have you got some signed permission from the neighborhood, for the neighbor?
He actually has
Yeah,
his,
he submitted a fill permit, but I just didn't have time to get it on the agenda. So I have been out there and it will, I think, help with the drainage because of the way that those properties
for
come
it.
together, but okay.
thank you.
Yeah.
You guys are the best. I'm doing it.
Probably would be good if you just saw that application and a letter of support.
Okay, and then we can just kind of get agreement through email.
Right.
Okay.
Just so that we crossed all our T's and dotted our I's.
Makes sense. Yep.
Thank you very much. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you. Well, Mary or Josh, I guess, actually.
Barry, I just call you next week.
Yeah.
Thank you. Have a
Well,
lovely evening.
animal control is under the police department. We chased Dennis out of here, didn't we?
We did.
You think you can pinch hit for this one?
Sure, be happy to. So essentially, this is just to transfer an asset of the animal control division from the Department of Public Works to the police department, since they are now overseeing that function. Pretty straightforward.
Any questions?
Aye.
Second motion.
From the pirate, am I right?
You
No, we're gonna get you an eye patch for the next meeting. Well, I gotta make a motion.
He made
No, I-
You made a motion.
I
You made a motion.
Why don't you make the motion there, Barry?
All right,
Did you
ladies,
please?
Mm-hmm.
I move to declare the following item as an asset transfer from the Webster Department of Public Works to the Webster Police Department. One Ford pickup truck F-150, asset number 5865.
Second. Councilman Dean?
Aye.
Councilwoman Cataldi? Aye. Councilman Cahill?
Aye.
Supervisor Flaherty?
Aye. Barry, since you're on a, do you know anything about this, or did, well, you guys don't do fleet management for the police,
No.
so,
Just trade-ins for the purchases. A resolution, I would declare the following items as trade-ins from the Webster Police Department. A 2016 Ford Taurus, four-door sedan, asset number 06744. 2017 Ford Explorer, SUV, asset number 06747.
Second. I would say. Councilman Dean?
Aye.
Councilwoman Cataldi? Aye. Councilman Cahill?
Aye.
Supervisor Flaherty?
aye. Okay, well, it is what time, Dolly? 9:54. As we tie things up, we'll see if anybody wants to call in.
Isn't there an executive session or something you want to do? Joking.
I was gonna say, I can go up with something.
Um,
I'm gonna
Yeah.
glass of water.
Okay, well, Barry, do you have anything?
A glass of water.
Barry's here all week, doing his stand-up. I think that's okay. We're about to. Mary, anything?
No, everything's good.
All right. Hopefully the kids are in bed when you get home.
Oh, yeah, they should be. They've been there a while.
Yeah. Josh?
Nothing to report tonight.
Paul?
Thanks for everybody's hard work on the budget.
John?
Thanks.
Eddie?
Good night, everyone.
Charlie? You gonna get us in trouble?
Happy Halloween.
All right. And Dolly? All right. This meeting is officially closed.
Hey,